In the world of investing and personal finance, there is the well-known 4% rule or principle. And some say it's a good rule, but a lot of people say it's a bad one, that it is either too much or too little. And how? I am going to make clear in this video. But what it is good for, it's good for your own future financial planning. Now the 4% rule, of course, is the idea or expectation that you can take 4% out of your investments annually in a year without endangering your primary capital, meaning indefinitely, or at least until the day you die. And this, of course, has a lot to do with the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. Meaning the people who do this, what they try to do is get just amount of wealth, investments, that with the 4% rule, they could go into retirement as early as possible. And this channel, by the way, is not a FIRE movement channel. You see, the purpose of wealth is not that you get to retire as soon as possible. The purpose of wealth is that you get to choose what you do for a living, when and where. And the way you calculate this, of course, is that you take the number of money you need in a year, gross before taxes, and you divide that by 0.04, or you multiply that by 25, because 1 divided by 0.04 is 25. Or instead, what you could do is, you could take the amount of money you need in 1 month, or what you earn right now in 1 month, and multiply that by 300, because 12 months divided by multiplied by 25 is 300. So with the 4% rule, you can consider yourself as being financially independent. For example, let's say if you need 500 euros or dollars per month, with the 4% rule, it would come to 1.5 million. So with 1.5 million, you would be financially independent and could go into retirement. But remember, it was a bad rule, according to some. And the way it's a bad one is that, let's say if you have accumulated 1.5 million in the course of, let's say, 30 years, well, at that point, that 4% is probably going to be too little, because it's probably the growth of your investments will probably be more than, if I remember correctly, the 4% rule was based on the expectation that economic growth, average economic growth, meaning index funds, was on average 7% annually, and inflation was 3%, so then it came to 4%. But when you have built that 1.5 million, your annual growth is probably going to be more than that. For instance, the North American S&P 500, if I recall correctly, has been on average grown more than 10%, was it? So, if the growth of your wealth has been more than 10%, or let's say 10%, with inflation being 3%, well, now you could take 7%, which is more than 4%. But when you have built that wealth in the course of, let's say, 30 years, what you have is, you have your own personal experience, what the actual growth has been. And if it has been 10%, well, now you can take 7% based on your own personal experience. And as a main rule in wealth is that it's always better to have more wealth than less wealth. But what the 4% rule is good for, it's good for when you start planning your future finances. All right, so that's what it was good for. But then that was the first thing. But then for some, they say that the 4% is too much. And the people who it's too much for are the people in the FIRE movement. And I believe it's true. Because if you intend to go into retirement, let's say at the age of 40, well, today, people can live easily to be over 80. So that's over 40 years. And if you intend to live 40 years with that 4%, well, in 40 years, a lot will happen. There's going to be recession, even depressions, and if you live in Europe, even wars. As I speak from Finland, historically, Finland has been in a war at least once in 100 years, and it's been 80 years since the last war, so yeah, a lot can happen. So for those people, the 4% is too much, that it should be 3%, 2%. But like I said, this channel is not a FIRE movement channel, and I would not recommend it for anyone. But the point was that the 4% rule is good for your future financial planning when you are first starting out. And after you have built your wealth based on your own personal experience, you can determine how much you can take that annually without endangering your primary capital. And that was the point of this video. My name is Henri Heikkala, and this is Radio Heikkala. Thank you for watching.